The night my ex-boyfriend laughed at my Navy career, he thought he was the loudest voice in the room. He thought humiliation was entertainment. What he didn't realize was that a two-star admiral was sitting 3 stools behind him, listening to every word. My name is Brooke Harrison. I joined the United States Navy at 22 because I wanted a life built on purpose, not applause. And the man who tried to shrink me in public ended up watching me rise higher than he ever imagined. Before I tell you how that night changed everything, let me ask you something. Have you ever been mocked by someone who never understood your worth? If you have, stay with me. This story might feel personal. I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia, in a small blue house 5 miles from the naval shipyard. My father was a diesel mechanic who fixed engines that had seen more ocean than most people ever would. My mother worked night shifts as a nurse. Neither of them ever used the word sacrifice, but I watched them live it every day. When aircraft carriers slipped out of harbor at sunrise, I used to stand on the pier and feel something pull at me. I didn't want an easy life. I wanted a meaningful one. So I went to flight school in Pensacola. Long days. Longer nights. Navigation systems. Emergency protocols. Simulator drills that tested how fast your brain could think under pressure. That's where I met Ryan Cole. He was a civilian contractor, charming in a way that felt effortless. He'd lean against his truck in the parking lot after my shifts and ask about my day like it actually mattered. "You're different," he told me once. "Most people talk about what they want to be. You're already becoming it." I mistook observation for admiration. That was my first mistake. When I made lieutenant at 27, he took me to dinner. Champagne. A toast. "I'm proud of you," he said. I believed him. When I pinned on lieutenant commander at 32, something shifted. His congratulations felt thinner. The jokes started small. "Guess the Navy owns you now. Must be nice pushing paperwork while real soldiers do the hard stuff." He said it smiling, so I told myself it was harmless. At a backyard barbecue one summer, one of his friends asked what I did. Before I could answer, Ryan laughed and said, "She tells people what to do. It's kind of her thing." Everyone chuckled. I smiled. But something cracked quietly inside me. By then, I was running aviation logistics for an Atlantic Fleet carrier group. When aircraft went down or distress calls came in, my team coordinated response assets across hundreds of nautical miles. Helicopters. Refueling tankers. Coast Guard support. Decisions made in minutes that affected whether someone lived or didn't. I came home after 72-hour operations with salt in my hair and exhaustion in my bones. Ryan never asked about the missions. He asked if I could take off early for his friend's birthday. He asked if I really needed another deployment. He asked if I'd ever consider a normal job. Once, I tried to explain a rescue operation we had coordinated. A fishing vessel taking on water off the Carolina coast. 6 men pulled out before it sank. "That's great," he said, eyes on the road. "You should put that on your resume." That was when I realized he didn't see what I did. He saw what it took from him. His business ventures kept failing. A custom bike shop. A sports bar partnership. An online consulting idea that never materialized. I loaned him money twice. $15,000 total. He never paid me back. I told myself that's what love looked like. Support. Loyalty. Patience. But loyalty without respect becomes self-betrayal. The night everything collapsed started like any other Friday. A few junior officers invited me to a bar near Naval Station Norfolk. I almost said no. I was exhausted. But one of my mentors had told me, take a night off before burnout makes the choice for you. So I changed out of uniform, pulled on jeans and a navy sweater, and walked into Barley's around 7:30. The place was loud. Crowded. Full of sailors unwinding after duty. I was halfway across the room when I heard my name. Not spoken kindly. Laughed. Lieutenant Commander Brooke Harrison, Ryan's voice carried above the noise. Sounds impressive, right? She makes coffee for real soldiers. My feet stopped moving. His friends laughed. One of them added, I didn't even know women could do actual military stuff. Ryan leaned back on his stool like he was hosting a show. She sits at a desk and sends emails. Trust me. I felt the heat rise in my face. I could have walked away. Years of discipline told me to stay composed. But then he saw me. His smile widened. Hey, Brooke. Come here. Tell them about your career. Air quotes included. The room quieted just enough to make it worse. I stepped forward slowly. My voice steady. Evening, Ryan. He raised his beer like we were sharing a joke. Tell them what you actually do. Before I could respond, the older man sitting beside him stood up. Pressed khakis. Navy polo. Academy ring catching the light. His presence shifted the air in the room instantly. Son, he said calmly. Stand up. Ryan blinked. Confused. But he obeyed. The man turned toward me, and I recognized him immediately. Rear Admiral Thomas Caldwell. My former deployment commander. Now Fleet Forces Senior Staff. Lieutenant Commander Harrison, he said formally. Didn't expect to see you here. I straightened instinctively. Good evening, sir. He nodded once, then looked at Ryan. This officer coordinated the Hellman search operation last year. 6 lives saved. Cross-service assets managed under extreme conditions. I trust her judgment with American lives. The silence became absolute. She does not make coffee, he continued. She makes decisions. Ryan's face drained of color. His friends stared at the floor. Admiral Caldwell's voice remained even. Choose your words carefully in a Navy town. Then he sat back down like he had merely commented on the weather. I didn't say another word. I walked out into the humid Virginia night, heart pounding, dignity intact. And that was the moment I understood something clearly. Respect isn't negotiated. It's revealed. And Ryan had just revealed exactly who he was. But that wasn't the end of it. That night would follow me into promotion boards, into command, into rooms far bigger than that bar. And the man who laughed would not be finished trying to reclaim his pride. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was embarrassed. Not because I was angry. But because something inside me had shifted permanently. When someone shows you exactly how small they see you, you can't unsee it. I drove home from Barley's with the windows down, humid Virginia air whipping against my face, replaying every word. She makes coffee for real soldiers. It wasn't the insult itself that stung. I'd heard worse. It was the intention behind it. Ryan had needed an audience. He needed to feel taller, even if it meant cutting me down in public to do it. By the time I reached my apartment, the anger had cooled into clarity. I was done. The next morning, my phone lit up before sunrise. 7 missed calls. 14 text messages. Ryan's name over and over. I didn't read them. I deleted them without opening a single one. Then I laced up my running shoes and headed to base. 6 miles. Steady pace. I let the rhythm clear my head. I had a logistics review briefing at 0900 hours. Aircraft maintenance rotation adjustments. Fuel allocation projections. There was no space in that room for personal drama. And that, I realized, was the difference between my world and his. My world required accountability. His thrived on excuses. By Monday, the story had traveled across base like wildfire. Sailors talk. Officers talk even more. Apparently, half the bar had been active duty or affiliated. The version that circulated made it sound like Admiral Caldwell had orchestrated a public execution. He hadn't. He'd simply told the truth. My mentor, Commander Elise Morgan, called me into her office that afternoon. She closed the door behind me. "You holding up?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "That's not what I'm asking." I exhaled slowly. "I'm disappointed. Not in what happened. In who he turned out to be." She nodded like she'd seen this before. Some men admire strong women until they realize they can't control them. I sat down across from her desk. He never asked about the missions. He only complained about the schedule. Because the mission wasn't about him. She leaned back. "Let me tell you something important, Brooke. You didn't lose anything Friday night." He did. That settled into my chest differently than anything else. I hadn't lost a relationship. I'd shed a weight. Ryan showed up at my apartment Thursday evening. I saw him through the peephole, unshaven, eyes red, holding a bouquet of grocery store roses. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "I was drunk," he started immediately. "I didn't mean it." "You meant it," I said calmly. "You just didn't expect consequences." He ran his hand through his hair. "You make me feel small sometimes." That stopped me. "I don't make you feel anything, Ryan. You decide how you feel." His jaw tightened. "You act like you're better than everyone." "No," I replied evenly. "I act like I worked for what I have." Silence stretched between us. For 6 years, I had tried to make space for his insecurities. For 6 years, I had dimmed my light so he wouldn't feel overshadowed. I wasn't doing that anymore. "We're done," I said quietly. "Brooke, don't do this." "I already did." I closed the door. And that was the last conversation we had face to face. 2 weeks later, I received word that my promotion packet to commander had officially moved to final review. Oh, 5. The rank that separates career officers from potential strategic leaders. I threw myself into preparation. The May Joint Training exercise was approaching, involving 3 carrier groups and cross-service aviation coordination. I worked 14-hour days refining contingency plans. Then disaster hit mid-exercise. A systems malfunction grounded half our strike aircraft 12 hours before scheduled deployment simulations. The room buzzed with tension. Every officer in that operations center was waiting for direction. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't panic. I rerouted assets, redistributed maintenance teams, pulled reserve components from an allied squadron, and adjusted fuel schedules in under 3 hours. We launched on time. Later that evening, Admiral Caldwell appeared in the command center. He walked up beside me quietly. "That was textbook crisis management, Harrison." "Thank you, sir." "You didn't hesitate." "No, sir." He studied me for a moment. "Don't ever let anyone convince you you're less than what you are." That sentence carried weight. Not because I needed validation, but because leaders recognize other leaders. September arrived heavy with humidity and anticipation. The promotion results were scheduled for release at 1,400 hours. I tried to stay focused on routine reports, but every tick of the clock sounded louder than the last. At 13:57, my phone rang. Commander Morgan's name. Get to my office. Now. I walked down the hallway with measured steps, refusing to speculate. She didn't make me wait. Congratulations, Commander Brooke Harrison. For a second, I couldn't process the words. The board was unanimous, she continued. Strongest logistics command record in your peer group. My throat tightened. Years of deployments. Missed holidays. Long nights in windowless rooms making life or death decisions. Worth it. The pinning ceremony was small and formal. My parents drove in from Norfolk. My father's hands shook slightly as he adjusted my new insignia. Proud of you, kid, he whispered. Ryan called that night. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat alone in my apartment staring at the silver oak leaves on my collar. Commander Brooke Harrison. I hadn't achieved it to spite him. I had achieved it because I never stopped doing the work. A week later, a letter arrived. Handwritten. No return address. I recognized his handwriting immediately. Brooke, I was wrong. I was insecure. You were rising and I was failing, and instead of fixing myself, I tried to drag you down. I'm sorry. I read it once. Then again. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. Forgiveness doesn't require access. His apology didn't erase the disrespect. It simply confirmed what I already knew. I kept climbing. Over the next 3 years, I led 2 carrier logistics deployments and implemented a supply chain restructuring model that reduced response time by 18% across the Atlantic fleet. I mentored junior officers. I earned respect not by demanding it, but by delivering results. And slowly, something shifted inside me. I stopped thinking about Ryan altogether. Not because I forced myself to forget, but because he no longer mattered in the narrative of my life. The next board I faced would determine something far bigger. Captain. Oh, 6. And beyond that, potentially, a star. But that path would require navigating politics at levels far more complicated than a loud bar in Norfolk. And it would require a thicker skin than I'd ever needed before. Because the higher you rise, the more visible you become. And visibility attracts both respect and resistance. Promotion to commander changed my rank, but it didn't change the standard I held myself to. If anything, it raised it. 5 meant broader authority, sharper scrutiny, and fewer margins for error. It also meant I was officially on the radar for something bigger. 6 months after pinning on oak leaves, I received orders to report to the Pentagon for a joint logistics assignment. High visibility. High pressure. Career-defining. I remember standing in my empty apartment the night before I left Norfolk, looking around at the walls that had witnessed every stage of my growth. The arguments. The silence after the breakup. The phone call announcing my promotion. The night I read Ryan's apology letter. That chapter had closed. I wasn't running from it. I had simply outgrown it. Washington was a different battlefield. In Norfolk, results spoke loudly. At the Pentagon, politics whispered just as powerfully. Meetings layered on meetings. Briefings stacked on briefings. Army colonels debating Air Force generals about procurement timelines while Marines quietly maneuvered behind the scenes. It was a chessboard disguised as bureaucracy. The first time I briefed a 3-star panel on inter-service supply chain integration, I felt the weight of every eye in the room. Some measured. Some skeptical. Some calculating. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush my slides. I presented data. Cost projections. Operational risk assessments. I answered questions directly. No fluff. No ego. When it was over, a senior Air Force colonel approached me. "You're not what I expected," he said. I met his gaze evenly. "What did you expect, sir?" He smiled faintly. Less decisive. That was the moment I understood something critical. Doubt doesn't disappear at higher ranks. It just wears better uniforms. Over the next year, I led a cross-service initiative that streamlined deployment logistics for humanitarian response missions. It required coordination between Navy airlift, Army ground transport, and Air Force rapid deployment units. It also required navigating egos larger than aircraft carriers. But I built alliances. Not through flattery. Through competence. Then the hurricane hit. Category 5. Devastation across the Caribbean. Infrastructure collapsed. Ports destroyed. Airfields flooded. The Secretary of Defense authorized immediate mobilization. 12 ships. 40 aircraft. Thousands of personnel. I was tasked with coordinating the logistics backbone of the entire operation. For 6 straight weeks, I lived inside a command center. Coffee cups stacked beside satellite phones. Maps pinned across walls. I slept in 4-hour increments on a cot in my office. We rerouted aircraft around damaged airstrips. We established floating supply hubs offshore. We coordinated with FEMA, allied navies, and international aid groups. And when the final evacuee was transported to safety, I stood in that command center surrounded by exhausted officers and realized we had done something that mattered. Not strategically. Not politically. Humanly. The commendation from the Secretary of the Navy went into my record. So did letters from allied governments. And for the first time, my name began circulating in conversations I wasn't present for. Flag consideration. Rear Admiral. 07. When the board convened, I didn't allow myself to imagine the outcome. I had seen too many qualified officers passed over. But on a humid July afternoon, my mentor, now a Commodore, called me into her office. She didn't sit down. She smiled. "Congratulations, Rear Admiral Harrison." The room seemed to tilt slightly. 24 years of service. From ensign to admiral. I felt pride, yes. But more than that, I felt responsibility. Flag rank isn't about prestige. It's about direction. Policy. Decisions that ripple through thousands of lives. The promotion ceremony was held aboard a destroyer. Full honors. My mother in the front row. My father had passed the year before, but I carried his memory with me like an anchor. When the star was pinned to my collar, I felt the weight of every sacrifice that led to that moment. Not just mine. The sailors who trusted me. The mentors who defended me. The young officers who watched me closely to see what was possible. That night, alone in my quarters, I opened the drawer where Ryan's letter had remained untouched for years. I read it once more. Then I sealed it in an envelope and placed it in a box labeled Lessons. Not regrets. Not wounds. Lessons. I never saw him again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he married, started a family, found steady work. I genuinely hoped he had grown. But growth for him no longer intersected with my path. Years later, when I chaired my first flag-level planning session, surrounded by admirals and generals debating national strategy, I thought briefly about that bar in Norfolk. About the laughter. About the humiliation that almost shook my confidence. And I realized something. That moment did not define me. My response did. I didn't scream. I didn't retaliate. I didn't chase validation. I kept working. I kept rising. I kept becoming. Respect is not demanded in one explosive moment. It is built quietly over decades of consistent excellence. Now, when young officers, especially women, ask me how to handle being underestimated, I tell them this. Let them doubt you. Let them misunderstand you. Let them laugh if they must. Then let your work answer for you. Because the most powerful response to dismissal is success delivered with discipline. I am Rear Admiral Brooke Harrison, United States Navy. I have coordinated rescue missions, led humanitarian operations, commanded thousands of sailors, and shaped policies that will outlast my career. But one of the most important battles I ever fought was internal. The decision not to shrink for someone else's comfort. The decision to walk away from disrespect. The decision to choose purpose over pride. If this story resonated with you, I want to hear from you. When were you publicly underestimated, and how did you respond? What boundary changed your life for the better? Have you ever had someone defend you in a moment that could have broken you? Drop your story in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to read tonight. If you believe in standing tall after being dismissed, hit that like button. Subscribe for more real stories about resilience, leadership, and reclaiming your power. And remember this. You don't rise by proving someone wrong. You rise by refusing to become small.